You're listening to Transformation at Work, your one-stop guide to Salesforce success. And this is Jarrett 411, your up-to-the-minute source on the latest breaking news and developing trends in and beyond the Salesforce ecosystem. From macroeconomic events to implementation questions, legislative changes, and more, our team of experts are here to provide the updates you and your business need to thrive in a constantly evolving industry landscape. In this episode, we're talking about retail shopping, and that means, somewhat inevitably, we're discussing the holidays. I want you to put on your customer hat for a second and answer me this question. How are you handling your gift shopping this year? Are you taking the old school approach, printing out a hard copy of a list, walking into a store, making the occasional trade-off of it's not what they wanted, but it's what they had available, making one stop, getting what you can, making do with the rest, heading home, easy peasy? I'm guessing probably not. More accurately, if you're anything like me or the average consumer, what you're probably doing is getting digital copies of your gift lists or grabbing links to your loved one's Amazon wish lists, and from there going to the website of your favorite retail outlet, signing up for their email list if they have it so that you can get access to their holiday sales, checking their pricing versus Amazon's, comparing shipping deals, finding the items you want, loading them into your cart, setting up a date to go to that store, pick it up in person, come home, check it, make sure everything looks good, and get ready to give that gift with a smile. Does that sound more accurate? Look, the reality is the shopping experience is unrecognizable to what it was 15 years ago, and honestly, that statement isn't exactly untrue when we look back 10 years, 5, or at this point even 2 or 3. And looking forward, that kind of rapid change has become so commonplace that it's tough to really say what shopping is gonna look like 6 months from now. All of which raises the question, how do you prepare for any of this as a retailer or a consumer goods supplier, many of whom are still reeling from the changes they had to implement out of necessity when COVID hit? The key to that question is to really understand what the modern customer is looking for, and using the data that many retailers already have to create the kind of tailored experience that meets those customers exactly where they are. To get to the heart of this discussion, we sat down with Rob Garf, Salesforce's VP and GM of Retail, and Rosa Campagna, Jarrett's Sales Director specializing in retail and consumer goods. Both bring tremendous experience in both retail and the Salesforce ecosystem to the conversation, with Rob bringing over 25 years experience as a retail practitioner, industry analyst, consultant, and software executive to his current role where he oversees Salesforce's retail product and solution strategy as well as their industry insights team, and Rosa bringing deep industry insights from her background in CPG and marketing as well as 5 years in and around the Salesforce ecosystem. We begin our conversation with what is ultimately at the heart of understanding retail operations, and that is, well, looking at the data to understand who the modern customer is and what a shopper's experience looks like in 2023. Here's Rob.
The way people shop has totally transformed over the last couple of years. You know, our data from our shopping index shows in 2020, we all know inherently we turned to digital, but our data shows that we saw a 40% increase in digital shoppers. So these are people that would ordinarily hang out online. They would browse, they would talk to their friends and family, they do email, but they wouldn't necessarily click the buy button. And they did, and they bought in whole new categories. Think food and beverage as an example. So as that is the backdrop, and now that we've come out of the pandemic and digital and physical need to play really nicely together in the sandbox, we're seeing that consumers are traversing all different channels. In fact, 9 different touch points in any given shopping journey. So these are consumers that have high expectations for convenience, for trust, for transparency, and they need that in a seamless and frictionless. And I think that's really key. The expectation for no friction in the shopping process has never been higher than it is today.
Just to throw out another fun little fact, 56% of customers expect all offers to be personalized to them, especially if they're a brand that they're already engaged with. And so if I'm walking into an Aritzia or a Zara and I've previously looked online, I want to be able to have that, to use your word, frictionless experience from online to in-store. So I think that the personalization piece is also really critical to customers' expectations when shopping.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Rosa. You know, frictionless has now become the new watermark, but now it's about personalization, it's about service, it's about relevancy, and trying to do that in a way across all these disparate touch points.
And as those customer shopping habits have changed, we see that reflected in the retail landscape, where younger, leaner, faster, more agile retail outlets have risen up and gained a foothold by meeting those customers where they are and delivering the kind of experience that connected shoppers are looking for. Here's Rob with more detail.
Through the 2000s, Zara and Uniqlo and the fast fashion retailers were really lauded as those that can understand consumer sentiment and demand and react and respond really quickly and cost effectively. Now you have the likes of Shein, who are manufacturing product after product, line after line, SKU after SKU every day, and introducing new SKUs every day as well. And they're able to move really, really quickly. And I don't know if all retailers will essentially get to that level of agility, but to be able to respond, not just in a linear supply chain, but a very fragmented supply chain, really will be a competitive differentiator moving forward.
And of course, as you can imagine, both of these changes in customer buying habits, changes in how retail outlets operate, have had a tremendous ripple effect on the suppliers that are working with those outlets to deliver product. For more on that, let's throw it over to Rob.
You know, supply chain, if you look back in history, was really linear from the supplier to the DC to the store. Then you introduce the online model, then you introduce the drop ship model, especially where inventory is sitting in all these different nodes of the supply network. And so for suppliers to really understand the demand, it gets even more difficult, especially during the bullwhip effect of the pandemic, where we had too much inventory, then we didn't have enough inventory. Inventory got stuck in the port of LA, and then we overbought. And so it's really difficult for suppliers to understand their manufacturing capacity, their raw material procurement, and ultimately where the product, along with working with the retailer, that product should be to most efficiently and effectively distribute it wherever and whenever the customer wants it.
Now, all of those changes are dramatic enough on their own, but as anyone who has worked in retail, whether that's a frontline worker, executive, or anything in between, can tell you, it's all going to get exacerbated by the holiday season. And ultimately, along the way, a lot of pain points that might be happening under the surface are going to come to light. Here's Rob with more on those exacerbating effects.
We have looked at the holiday for the last 10 years or so and understood the macro trends that are happening from a consumer perspective, from a retailer and brand perspective. In 2020, it was around the last mile, where product going to get to the doorsteps. Then 2021 was the first mile, was product going to get through the port of LA and into the domestic supply chain. Last year was all about effectiveness and how that's going to impact margin and profitability, especially as costs were surging and demand was waning. And now it's all about retention. So for retailers, for their suppliers, it's about how to create stickiness with existing customers. By the way, this isn't anything new, but what we've seen over the last couple of years is there are a lot of switching of brands, partly because of availability. Some of it was because of price. And now it's about creating stickiness, but also about increasing the share of wallet by providing new categories, new services, and actually introducing whole new business lines. And that comes back to better understanding the consumer. And it creates a great flywheel of insights around the consumer. You offer them new things, they like them, and now you build the profile and the preferences and understanding. And then retailers and suppliers can collaborate together to bring new products and services to market that will best serve the consumers. And again, create that stickiness and retention.
So what can you do? If you're a retailer, a consumer goods supplier, how do you react to all of these massive changes in customer, in marketplace, in supply chain? The answer, as Rob breaks down here based on Salesforce's research, is really to look at some of the changes that have been brought on out of necessity in the past few years, such as BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, and really reimagine how they can be used to increase stickiness, create a bespoke, personalized experience for the customer, and drive success for the business during the holiday season and beyond.
Buy online, pick up in store, or click and collect had totally accelerated in the course of the pandemic. The reason was you couldn't go in a store. So in many cases, People wanted to buy in the comfort of their own home and then pick it up in the safety and convenience in or around the store. So retailers really spun up this capability very quickly. And in many cases, it's sticking. And it's a feature that consumers in many cases expect, especially around the holiday season. If you think about it, buy online, pick up at store extends the shopping calendar after the shipping cutoff date, because a consumer can buy online and then the very next day, or even the same day in many cases, pick it up in or around the store. So in fact, last year also, those retailers and brands that had this capability saw a 5 times higher growth after the shipping cutoff date than those that didn't.
As Rob pointed out, though it was rolled out as a necessity, many retailers are choosing to keep BOPIS in place even though they fully open their doors to the customer, because it offers an opportunity to deepen that experience even when a shopper isn't necessarily in the store itself. Here's Rosa with a personal example of how BOPIS can lead to increased sales and a deeper relationship between customer and brand.
It's actually a story that happened to me this weekend. So I'm Canadian. I'm shopping at Canadian Tire, and my boyfriend and I are going camping. We're going to NASCAR next week. And so we're preparing to get some stuff in order. So we purchased a sleeping bag online. We're going to pick it up in store. But before we did, we walked around the store. We actually bought more items. So we increased our prospected shopping cart. And then by the end of our experience, we walked into Canadian Tire's designated pick up and go. So what was really interesting is they actually have lockers that you can go in, punch in your key code and or scan your QR, locker pops open, and there is your item. What's really interesting about this model that I liked, and Rob, I'd love to hear your 2 cents on this too, was how buy online, pick up in store also became self-service. So I went online, I purchased my item, but now I'm in a designated zone. It's labeled really nicely. It's green. It's perfect. So visually, I know exactly where I'm going. I didn't have to speak with an associate, so associates could still do their business. But I was able to enable myself to get my item, pick it up, and quite literally go.
I love that story, and actually speaks really nicely to one of our predictions this holiday season. We anticipate that there'll be an incremental $28 billion of purchases from people that buy online and then go in to the store. So there's an awesome opportunity. We've obviously, as I mentioned before, seen the uptick when you can offer BOPIS after the shipping cutoff, but this actually drives traffic and incremental sales within the physical footprint. Now, this is hard though. I talked to a lot of retailers around the world about the operational complexity to pull this off. Now, Canadian Tire, in your case, really thought through the flow of traffic and what you want as a consumer. But, I often hear from some folks that this has actually been pulled back by many retailers. And again, it's because of the complexity. Think about the store execution. I know Jarrett has a whole offering around retail execution to make sure what's planned by the CG company and the retailer gets executed in the intended fashion. But if we don't have the time as associates, as frontline workers, to actually execute the buying online, so you're picking, packing, and then holding it for somebody to pick up. If you're not providing the right visibility and incentives, if they're becoming essentially the store associates, fulfillment experts, we should look at their fulfillment rate. And we should look at, by the way, other tasks that they're being asked to do, like being social media managers and digital concierge. But if we're not changing the processes, if we're not changing the incentives, if we're not giving the space to the associates to actually execute this, it becomes a triple whammy of crankiness, right? The store associate's overwhelmed, so they're cranky. The customer is cranky because they're not getting anything in the intended fashion, and it's creating more friction. And then the retailer is cranky because they're losing sales, they're losing loyal customers.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about how retailers are also becoming in their own way fulfillment centers. So there's about, I think, a 50% increase in staff across all the malls. So how do we train those people quickly on things like, what do you do if you meet a member in store? What do you do in relationships to returns and exchanges? And, is there a way that we could leverage some generative AI around upskilling those workers quite quickly so that they can hit the floor day one and being able to provide that service that people like members expect? What do you think?
Yeah, that's awesome. You hit upon a lot of awesome stuff there. I want to touch upon the frontline worker and then generative AI. Retailers seasonal workers is synonymous. That happens over the course of the holiday season. They have to be trained up quickly. They need to be productive even quicker. And what happens is that shoppers have to log into 12 different systems on a daily basis to do their job. And that's just impossible to be as productive as they need to be and provide the engagement that consumers and the service that consumers expect. So it is a lot about empowering them and giving them the tools they need. The other piece you mentioned, AI, as it relates to loyalty. I love the thread you went down on loyalty because it becomes the gift that keeps on giving, because loyalty is an amazing mechanism for people knowingly providing information about themselves for getting something in return. And data is going to be what fuels generative AI, not just all the data that lives out there on the internet, but the contextual data, the relevant data that's within the four walls of the retailer, because then it helps ground the results and the output that anyone will get, whether that's a service agent or, Rosa, to your point before, a frontline worker in a physical store.
Which brings us to present and brings us to the other major challenge retailers are facing as they head into the 2023 holiday season, which is change is still happening. That uncertainty of what the shopping experience is going to look like 6 months, a year, 2 years from now is still very much there. So how do you create that experience that not only addresses where customers are now, but where they could be in an uncertain future? Here's Rosa with her thoughts.
Instead of playing catch up, just be ready to shift, right? I think that if there's anything that we learned during the pandemic was that things move really quickly. And I don't know if all retailers were prepared for that massive shift. And so I think being mindful of the shift, anticipating the shift, knowing that a shift can happen. So making sure that you maintain that buy online, pick up in store section of your brick and mortar, and that you continue to, you've said this a few times, this isn't anything new, but I think what we're talking about is the evolution of the trend as opposed to it being untrue, if that makes sense. So we always want to make sure that we're capturing sentiment on our customers and our products, but how are we doing it in 2023 that makes it actionable and relevant today? So how are we leveraging new tools like data cloud, like AI, and so on and so forth, to make sure that we are consistently on top of that trend and we can shift quickly? So less about playing catch up and more about being agile.
Yeah, it comes back to data, consumer data. And don't forget about product data as well. As much as there are profile information and preferences for consumers, like their loyalty status, like the offers that they have, like the chats that they've engaged with, or the orders that have happened in the past or are in process. You layer on top all of the amazing attributes for products, like the descriptions, the inventory, the images, the reviews that everybody gives, and you mash that together and it creates an amazing Venn of intelligence. And so that is the baseline, which, by the way, again, isn't anything new in retail. We've been collecting data and understanding our consumers since the beginning of the electronic cash register in the mid-'70s. But now it's about managing that data, having a single view of that data, and most importantly, activating that data, whether that's when a service agent needs to provide some sort of issue resolution, or that's a frontline worker, a store associate, where a consumer's coming in and we greet them and are able to understand their past purchases and get them to the product more effectively. And so being able to activate that data either for self-service or to empower the frontline workers.
And when we talk about knowing customers, we talk about knowing market shifts, and we talk about being ready to pivot at a moment's notice. That is what brings us to understanding customer data. And that, as Rob points out here, is what brings us to Salesforce and the ways in which it can empower retailers and consumer goods suppliers to be ready for whatever that next market shift is.
I am more excited than ever with the portfolio we have at Salesforce and our customer 360. We provide the applications across sales, service, marketing, commerce to engage with your customers in a whole new way. And we've increasingly provided the data and the intelligence to make those interactions smarter. And so Data Cloud really provides a single source of truth for understanding the shopper. And with Einstein and the generative AI features layered in it now, we are able to action them more effectively, whether that is around marketing and coming up with different subject lines or email copy to test and then drive at scale, whether that's in commerce around product descriptions or a digital concierge where, the new UI is AI actually, and the prompting and the back and forth chats, and then service as well, and being able to have replies that are more on brand voice and being able to create efficiencies so the service agent isn't blocked out of the equation, but is more empowered to do more chats and do them with more relevancy. So across, again, these 9 different touch points in any given shopping journey, Salesforce is providing a unified platform, Customer 360, and really allowing our retailers and brands to manage the data about the consumer in particular, and then activate, operationalize that data wherever, whenever. As we talked about, when the consumer has a higher and higher expectation for removing the friction, for more personalization, which will ultimately equate to customer loyalty.
Mic drop. I have no notes, Rob. That was impeccable and wonderfully off the cuff. I think that if there were any 2 cents that I can add from an implementation partner's perspective and how we engage with Salesforce is it's really exciting to see retailers and brands take ownership of wanting that customer 360 and creatively using Salesforce to tackle their unique needs and in relationship to their technology maturity. And so they might have started with a sales and service, but watching customers migrate to marketing cloud. And then from an ops perspective, something like an OMS, an order management system. So it's not just what's front facing or, I would say sales or marketing facing, but now we're actually talking about getting data on the supply chain so that manufacturers and distributors and retailers have that, I would say, linear-ish perspective of how does product go from point A to point B to point C, and then most importantly, how does the customer feel about it? And Salesforce gives us the tools to do all those things.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I have an old friend in the industry. He's not old, but he's been a friend for a long time, and he's been in the industry for a long time. And that was CIO for many years and now COO for a retailer. And the way he puts it is, in order to provide a seamless experience for the customer, you need to provide a seamless experience back through the entire supply chain. And that's why I find it super interesting, Jaren's approach of not just looking at in isolation the retailer or the supplier, but understanding now the collaborative and transparent process that we need to have across the entire supply chain, as you were just mentioning, Rosa, from the back office, middle office, and how that will ultimately impact the front office and the shopping experience.
Look, the customer shopping experience is never going back to what it was. Even as the world goes back to normal, buying habits and technology changes that were rolled out during COVID are here to stay. And retailers that want to differentiate themselves on customer service and deliver those outstanding experiences to customers again and again and again, they need to acknowledge that reality and start looking at how, with the data they already have and the processes that have already been put in place, and reimagine a shopping experience that isn't just the best of what's available now, but gives the customer what they're looking for well into a rapidly changing future that none of us can predict. And that is, make no mistake, a monumental challenge for any organization. However, by looking at the data, by deploying the right technologies, and by working with a trusted technology partner that can help you unlock those potentials, that is how you create a truly standout customer experience. This has been Transformation at Work. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to Rob and Rosa for some incredible insights during this conversation. Transformation at Work is, as always, produced by Jaren in collaboration with Salesforce. I am Jeff Stormer, your host and producer. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or head to Jaren.com to sign up for email updates when we release new episodes. Until next time, thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.